How you all doing, everybody? It's me, Crazyfrankie, and I'd like to welcome you to my Week 14 4 key game picks. Before we get into week number 14 and my discussion on that week, oh my gosh, where do I begin on things that happened in week number 13? I think I'll start with the fact that I would say that I'm going to start with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and obviously a lot of people who saw the Monday night game, it was a great Monday night game with the Cincinnati Bengals, but unfortunately, it kind of did come with a little bit of some costs that the Jaguars had. Obviously, everybody knows that Trevor Lawrence, as of the time of this video, has a high ankle sprain. From what they're saying, that they might have avoided disaster, but it's really hard to tell with leg injuries. You never know, because anything that involves the leg, it's really hard to say how healthy you really are, because one of the Jaguars linemen stepped on Trevor Lawrence. If everybody saw that video already, it looked pretty gruesome. In the way that Trevor Lawrence threw his helmet after he got stepped on, you could tell it didn't look good at all. It looked like he was in a lot of pain, and I could totally see why. Obviously, the Jaguars lost that game, and it kind of now puts the AFC South now into even bigger contention now, given the fact that the Houston Texans and C.J. Stroud and that offense have really come alive into an unexpected story, into an unexpected competitiveness that the division didn't think it was going to be wasn't going to be competitive in the first place. But now Houston is making this a real chase for the division. And it's crucial now for Jacksonville, and who knows how long that Trevor Lawrence is going to be out. It's now going to be crucial for them to try to keep pace. I pretty much say that the Jaguars pretty much have put themselves out of contention for the number one seed. I mean, the way it's looking right now, it's the way the AFC has suffered a ton of injuries in the conference. It's either going to be the Ravens or the Chiefs. They're probably going to end up as the number one seed. And speaking of talking about number one seeds in conference, and I think it's going, if you talk about the NFC, the 49ers look like they're on their way to clinching it, because this football team, well, look, right now, I would say that the 49ers look like the more complete team in the NFC. They embarrassed the Eagles at the Link in Philly, and obviously the Cowboys are right on their heels, and obviously Cowboys are smelling blood here. But when I look at the 49ers, barring any injuries, let's be real, as long as there are no injuries or anything unsuspected that could happen to this football team, the Niners look complete, and they look like the heavy favorites now to win the NFC. Given that the Eagles, they've had a tough stretch in the last 2 weeks, obviously playing a lot in a good amount of days that really just wear them out. And especially, it's not going to get any easier. You got the Cowboys coming in, a Cowboys team that's more rested, and the Eagles had with Swift, who knows what his injury status is. Jalen Hurts, who knows what his injury whatever his status is, because in that game against the 49ers, they evaluated him for a concussion, and it's hard to say where the Eagles now are going to be going into the huge divisional matchup, the second meeting between the Cowboys. When I look at what else happened in the Western League, obviously the Packers are making noise. They did beat the defending champions in Lambeau, and it's really getting interesting to see how far that Jordan Love and this offense have clicked, and see how far they can go. I mean, it's really hard to say what's going to come out within the final weeks of the regular season in terms of playoff positioning, but it's going to be quite interesting down the stretch. Anyways, enough of my rambling. Let's talk about week number 14. All right, I'm going to begin with key game number 1 here. I'm actually going to make this a quick pick here. And obviously, this is a big game. This is really a big game for this matchup here. I'm going to start with the Jaguars versus the Cleveland Browns. Both teams have quarterback status very much in question right now. I don't know the extent of Trevor Lawrence's injury, whether he's going to even attempt to play in this game, or whether C.J. Beathard is going to be playing in this game as well. And I don't know if the Browns will stick with Joe Flacco here, because it's tough to say. Now, I'm going to make this pick short and sweet, because I'm not going to give you any quarterback stats from last week, because obviously they're playing. It's hard to say who's going to be starting in this football game. But if I got to make this, I'm going to make this quick here. A lot of it's going to depend whether Trevor Lawrence will play in this game. If he doesn't, and they go to C.J. Beathard, obviously he's got talent on offense with Ridley, but that Browns defense has played very well. Obviously, they I don't know. I can't explain what happened to them against the Rams last week. That defense was nowhere to be found last week. But obviously, I could say that a lot of pressure on Cleveland is now on the defensive side because obviously they're not moving the ball effectively in the offensive side of the ball. And given that they have to struggle now with finding out what quarterback they might have to go with, obviously Flacco still, from what I read, the Browns they've kept Flacco on the practice squad. So who knows if he's going to start Sunday against this team. The Browns are actually a 3-point favorite. I don't know how they're a 3-point favorite. That number should go to you pick 'em status the way it's looking right now. I don't know how the Browns are kind of a favorite in this game. I really think those odds should be way lower to just you pick 'em. I'm going to only pick the Cleveland Browns on one thing. This is not a sure pick because I don't know what's going to happen in this football game. I'm picking the Browns. This is assuming that Trevor Lawrence is not going to play in this game. I really don't know. And I'm not going to change my pick here because once I make this video and post it up on my channel, that's it. I'm not making any more changes. If any big news comes in during the week, I cannot make any changes to it. Once I make my pick official on my video or in the description, that's it. I'm not going to change my pick at all. That's going out of subject. I will pick the Browns because of their defense. I think to me, without Trevor Lawrence at quarterback for the Jaguars, you're putting a ton of pressure on Behard. It's really going to be tough for Jacksonville against that Cleveland defense. I would feel more comfortable if Trevor Lawrence was at quarterback. He would give them a good chance. And this is huge for Jacksonville as much as it is for Cleveland. Both teams vying for playoff spots. Obviously for Jacksonville to stay in front in the AFC South because the Texans are not far behind. I'm picking the Browns here over the Jaguars. Key game number 2. The Colts versus the Bengals. Obviously another important game for both these two teams. Obviously for the Colts, they're trying to catch Jacksonville, as well as trying to keep pace with the Texans as well. And obviously for Cincinnati, they're trying to keep any sort of slim playoff hopes they have. Now, Gardner Minshew was 26 of 42, 312 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interception, in an overtime win against the Titans last week. Now, Jay Browning, 32 of 37, 354 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interceptions in a big Monday night win over Jacksonville. Colts are barely a 1-point favorite, which is going to probably go to you pick 'em status by the time it's kickoff. A lot of it's going to determine can Browning and that offense deliver again. Obviously, they're having some trouble on the defensive end for the Bengals, and a lot of it's going to determine for the Indianapolis side, can Gardner Minshew keep the offense going, because they really got into a shootout with the Titans, and you could tell that both teams' offenses are struggling, and it wouldn't surprise me in this football game if this becomes a shootout. Tough to say here. I think for this football game, and it's going to come down to who doesn't turn the ball over in this game. And obviously both Indy and Cincy got into a back-and-forth football game between their respective games. And it wouldn't surprise me if this is going to happen the same way in this football game. It's a 50-50 pick here. It'll probably go to you pick 'em status, even though currently right now the odds makers has the Colts as the favorite as just by 1. But I'm picking the Bengals. I think if Joe Browning, the way he got that Joe Browning, he got that offense going with Chase and Higgins, I think to me the Bengals have a shot in this football game. It could go either way. You can't go wrong with either of these two teams. But I just think the Bengals have more of the talent on the wide receiver end. Indy could run the ball a little bit, but obviously in terms of in the passing game, Gardner Minshew really didn't play all that well last week, despite the 2 touchdown passes he had. I just think the Bengals offense is a little bit better than the Colts, but it's going to be determined what happens on the football field. I'm going to pick the Bengals. It's not a sure pick here. I think the Bengals will beat the Colts. It's a tough game to pick here. Tough to say. It wouldn't surprise me if this game becomes a back-and-forth affair. I'm going to pick the Bengals here. Bengals +1. Bengals over the Colts. All right, key game number 3. Buffalo Bills versus the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are a slight, believe it or not, they're a slight 2.5 favorite in this game, which which I would say that's about right, to be quite honest with you. A lot of questions on the Bills side. Obviously, they were on their bye week last week. Josh Allen in week 12 was 29-51, 339 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a heartbreaking loss to the Eagles. Now, Mahomes, in an unusual loss they had to the Packers last week, he was only 21 of 33, 210 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 crucial interception that really cost them the game against the Packers. I really don't know where the Bills stand at this point. Obviously, the injury bug is killing this football team. And Josh Allen basically had to do it all himself in the game against the Eagles a couple of weeks ago. The Chiefs, obviously, there's some question marks on their offense as well. And obviously, the Chiefs had a lot of injuries in the game against the Packers last week. This is definitely going to be a much closer football game than I anticipate. Given that the injuries are catching up to the Chiefs are the offense, there's a lot of question marks in terms of wide receivers and how they're dropping passes. And you got to wonder for Buffalo, can they match up with the Chiefs? Because this is definitely going to be a back and forth affair. I can see this being a back and forth football game here. But I just think I'm going to pick the Chiefs here. I think they bounce back here. The Bills are in a lot of trouble in terms of any sort of playoff host because this doesn't get any easier for them. Playing the Chiefs Sunday and then they got the Cowboys next week. This pretty much could end their playoff hopes right now. The way it's looking at it, the way their schedule looks the rest of the way. I think the Chiefs bounce back in this game, but again, this is not a sure pick here. The Chiefs trying to fight their way to get to hopefully to remain that number 1 seed, and the Bills are fighting for their playoff lives here. The Bills. I think it's too little, too late for the Bills. There's no question. The injuries really had hurt them all season, and obviously a lot of question marks in terms of their coaching. And obviously Sean McDermott's job should be on the line if they don't get to the postseason. The Chiefs I'm picking here, I think they're the much better team in this game here. But it'll be a close game, but I'm picking the Chiefs here at -2.5. Chiefs over the Bills. And finally, key game number 4. It is the Eagles versus the Cowboys. Sorry. Cowboys are a slight 3-point favorite in this one here. I would say that's about right, but it wouldn't surprise me if this goes to 2.5. Hurts was 26 of 45, 298 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Keep in mind, I don't know how healthy he is going into this football game. Now, obviously, the Eagles are kind of worn out. And the Cowboys are much more rested thanks to the Thanksgiving game and the last Thursday night game as well. So they look to be more ready. Prescott was 29 of 41, 299 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. I think the fatigue factor is really kicking in for the Eagles here. And obviously, the Cowboys are trying to tie the division with the Eagles. Obviously, the way it's looking at it, both teams will be in the postseason for sure. But the way I look at it right now, I'm going to make this quite of a pick. I think to me, the Eagles, the fatigue factor is really getting to them right now. I don't know if they're going to be ready for this football game against the Cowboys. Obviously, they got really banged up against the 49ers. The 49ers really just banged them up all last week. I think to me, the Cowboys are smelling blood. I never thought I would say this, but I'm picking the Cowboys here. I think to me, the Cowboys will tie the Eagles for the division. But the Eagles will still the Eagles currently will hold some tiebreakers. So technically, even if they tie, the Eagles will still be ahead in the division because of the tie. They have some tiebreakers. But I think to me, Dallas will have a little bit more of an advantage. They're much more rested, and I think Michael Parsons will definitely get to Hurts in this football game. I think the Eagles are just worn out, and obviously they have some injuries and some players that they desperately need back on the offensive end. I think it's going to be really tough for the Eagles in this football game here. I'm going to pick the Cowboys here at -3, Cowboys over the Eagles. All right, everybody, that wraps up my 4 key game picks for week number 14. Please check all of my week 14 picks in the description below. I'll talk to you guys next week when I make my picks for week 15. Take care and enjoy your NFL weekend.